So let's say you found a skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
All right, everybody. I am here with Kent Bent. Actually, let me just adjust a little bit about this. There we go. Okay, so it is Kent with Bent. However, unfortunately, there's no Bent. There's also no Maddie. This all of that kind of fell apart in the past 2 to 0 hours. So that's all right though. We're gonna soldier on. We've got some Matt Powell nonsense to talk about. We've still got 51 minutes of Matt Powell nonsense, so that will be interesting. And of course, we are going to go over the drinking rules, because we got a little bit of a drinking game. Now, like I always say, we don't actually encourage you to drink along with this, because, well, you know, we want you to be safe out there. And Dapper Dino, the channel, the person, the show, Kent with Bent, none of that actually encourages or takes any responsibility or liability for any death, dismemberment, grievous bodily injury, minor bodily injury, damage to property, or anything like that that is a result of you drinking with this game. So, let's go over the rules. So, we take a drink whenever in this case, Matt says something that's too stupid for us not to. Whenever he gets something right, whenever a joke just doesn't land, and since I don't believe there's much of a live audience, in this case it might just be if it doesn't land with me. Also, if there's a story that just didn't happen, there's, take a drink for that. Correct predictions, although I don't think I'm going to be making too many predictions here. And also, if Godzilla or Mothra come by, I don't know if I'm going to get a test for that, but hopefully I have that set up correctly. Who knows, right? It's been a weird day for technical stuff. But anyway, we had just left off with Matt Powell talking about the Big Bang and pointing out that nothing can go faster than the speed of light, which isn't strictly true, but we'll see where he goes with it. Damage from facepalming counts as a bodily injury that I do not take liability for. You watch this show at your own risk. Alright, so here we go, Matt Powell. Who, yes, I have heard, does in fact have an inflatable banana in his front yard that he calls Dr. Peel. Because Matt is very loose with his use of the word doctor.
There's 326 million trillion gallons of water on Earth alone.
Yep.
And so,
well, I mean, I don't know if that number is correct. I just don't choose to contest it because who cares?
who thinks that 326 million trillion gallons of water could be compressed down to an infinitesimal amount of space smaller than a single proton?
Wait, why does it feel like we've already heard this bit? But anyway, no one, Matt. No one thinks that, because it wasn't water. It was just energy. So I'll take a drink for Matt Powell strawmanning the Big Bang.
Anybody want to vouch for primitive superstition here today? That's what I thought. No, nobody in their right mind would want to vouch for these things because it's so scientifically illiterate. People that came up with the Big Bang Theory, they were very primitive and they were very scientifically illiterate.
You mean Georges Lemaitre and the other cosmologists of, like, the 30s who came up with it? No, they weren't. This isn't something like we're coming up with it in, like, you know, the 400s or something.
The Bible says, in the beginning, God spake, and it was. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. So, yeah, this is pretty important. So, in the Science Journal, I have one up on my screen here. You can't see it. But they say that life started in water, okay? And they'll say that the creation of life involved water. All science agrees.
I mean, yeah, so one of the things about life is that pretty much all of the chemicals that go into making up life require during some point in their synthesis, water to be available, whether it be as a solute or in many cases you're doing hydrolysis of various chemicals, so you're actually inserting water into the biochemical you're talking about. So yeah, water is a prerequisite for life as we know it. Now, there is always the possibility that some other solvent might be used somewhere else for life, right? Like I've heard proposals for ammonia as a solvent for life, We don't actually currently know if that's possible. I lean towards it's probably not possible. By the way, Bent is a bit not up for this. He's a bit unwell, so he's taking the day off. He's taking a sick day. I give him some sick days every year. He's using one of his two sick days a year. That's what it is. Actually, he gets as many as he needs. So this is one of them. But I say two because I don't think he's ever used one before. So even if I give him 2 years, so far at this rate, he's been good on that. So, yeah. So, yeah, apart from ammonia, which is a slight possibility that I actually don't think is a realistic possibility. Yeah, life needs water. So, if we're going to have some kind of naturalistic explanation for the origin of life, which is sort of the only option available to science to give, we can either have no explanation because we just can't come up with any possible way for life to have originated, or we come up with a natural one. Now, the thing is, if it were in fact a supernatural miracle that life were here, we simply would, upon investigating it, find absolutely no plausible way forward with the investigation of the origin of life, which is not what we're finding. So until we just reach a complete dead end in that research, it's still reasonable to assume that there's a natural cause, and all of our current ideas involve water. So keep going.
But if you type in on Google, how does DNA get destroyed? The very first thing that pops up is that DNA is vulnerable. It breaks down in sunlight and in water.
All right, let's try it, guys. We're gonna try the Matt Powell challenge. I'm Googling right now. How does DNA get destroyed? Get destroyed? I think that was what it said. Okay. Environmental factors such as heat and humidity can also accelerate the degeneration of DNA. For example, wet or moist evidence that is packaged in... Oh, we're talking about DNA evidence. Okay. Wet or moist evidence that is packaged in plastic will provide growth environment for bacteria that can destroy DNA evidence. Okay, so it's not the water, it's the bacteria. Okay. Let's see. Oh, here we go. The second. So the second is from The Guardian. Okay. Let's see. Human DNA has been recovered from Neanderthal fossils 70,000 years old. That is a record. There may be plenty of DNA recoverable from human body 10, 50, or even 150 years after death. Bodies of the world, blah, 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 blah. Okay. DNA is vulnerable. It breaks down in sunlight and water. And there are enzymes that naturally destroy it. Right. But in that same article, we're talking over the course of, decades and or centuries. So I'm not sure why this is a problem for abiogenesis, which is where Matt Powell's going. So I'm going to take a drink for saying that, oh no, over the course of a decade, DNA might break down. Yeah, well, in that time, Matt, it's going to have reproduced a whole lot more. So take a drink, guys. Plus, here's a simple fact. The fluid inside your cells is an aqueous solution, right? Like, that's... Your DNA is constantly bathed in water. So it's not going to break down like that just because it's in water. It's a process. It takes time. And time that is much higher than the order in which you're going to be producing DNA.
So they want to tell you that life came alive in the water and the bubbling in the broths is some chemical soup. Well, last I checked, chemicals don't help life at all.
I mean, life is entirely made of chemicals, so it's weird. It's sort of like saying transistors don't help computers when a computer is basically just a whole bunch of transistors. I don't know what to say. That's beyond stupid. So I'm taking a drink.
In fact, chemicals destroy life.
Yes, some chemicals do. Not all of them, you idiot. I can't be nice to Matt Powell. I'm sorry. It's hard to be nice to a guy who is this disingenuous and also advocates openly for genocide. So, I can only be so polite to this guy. And it's not very.
And so the very thing that they think helps things go is the very things that destroy life. Water, for example. Water destroys DNA. In fact, when somebody burns up in a fire, and it's very sad when this happens, but it happens.
Oh, thanks for putting that in there.
Where people burn up and they die. If somebody dies in a fire and somebody dies in the water, the FBI, when they do research, they can trace somebody that burnt up in a fire, their DNA molecules, better than in the water. So do you know what that means?
It means that when people die in the water, assuming that what you're saying is right, there are more things, including the aforementioned bacteria that we talked about, that was actually talking about DNA evidence, that will then come along and gobble up all the biomolecules. I'm going to go ahead and say that that's what that means. And that fires aren't the kind of places where you find abundances of bacteria. And so any remaining organic material, which usually, by the way, if someone burns to death, there's still a lot of organic material. It takes an extremely high temperature fire to get rid of all but the bones, and bones essentially don't burn. In fact, when people are cremated, the bones aren't burned, they're actually pulverized after the fact.
That you're more likely to have abiogenesis in a grill at 1,000 degrees Celsius than in the water.
Well, for all the reasons we've already gone over, that is beyond stupid, so feel free to take a drink, everybody.
You're more likely to go over to your grill, fire that thing up, because water scatters DNA. But people that are scientifically illiterate, like the atheist community, they're going to tell you, oh, you know, bubbling within these broths of the ocean was a chemical soup and life started in the water. People that don't know science, they just eat it right up because they haven't done the research.
And the Venerable Bede, who, by the way, is a channel patron, feel free to go check out the description if you are interested in that. There are perks. Points out that he has no problem with me being mean because Matt Powell would want him dead. Yeah. Yep, people who want members of my audience dead for stupid reasons, like now some member of my audience like killed one of Matt Powell's family members and then that's why he wanted you dead. Well, I'm opposed to the death penalty, but like I get it. But that's not the case. This is for having done Matt and really no one else any harm at all.
And so
I need you to get to your desktop real quick.
Yeah, not a problem. Let's do it.
Uh-oh.
There you go. That's what I need.
Yeah.
Okay, we drink during technical difficulties, guys. That's going to be the thing. I'm so dead after this episode.
I know we're alive, so
Yeah. So throughout this presentation,
All right, well, we started back up again, so I'm going to stop. But if there's dead air for technical difficulties, I say that's just a continuous drink at whatever speed you deem appropriate.
I know we've had some technical difficulties, but everything for a reason, everything for the glory of God. Look, the Bible says that God uses the foolish things of this world to confound the wise. And so God can use pretty much any situation for his glory. And when we look at creation versus evolution, you're going to walk away today convinced, even if you're on the fence. I've met people that are on the fence that evolution, you know, maybe evolution's true. Maybe it's true, but you'll be convinced that it's not.
Okay, guys, that's the challenge. We're going to be convinced that evolution isn't true by the end of the day. Well, okay, to be fair, this was one out of quite a few different streams that happened over the course of a few days. So we'll have to watch a few more of these. But by the end of them, we will all be convinced evolution isn't true. And for $4.99 US, Eric Virataler92 says, made movie about me saving the world from dinosaur deniers. You make a cameo appearance in it. Hope to premiere it Friday. It's a parody of Infinity War. All right, that sounds like a lot of fun. So thank you very much for the super chat. It does help support the channel greatly. I really do appreciate it. So here we go.
And so let's look here. Making that your main display.
it's your slides aren't showing because you had it only on one
here we go.
screen.
Keep drinking.
All right, restart your slideshow now.
Right.
Restart.
Sounds good. Just restart it all together.
No, just your slideshow.
Oh, okay. Go to PowerPoint.
And I'm about to finish this drink soon.
All right, here we go. Restarted, and is it showing up?
Oh, I'm keeping drinking. My goodness, I'm starting to
Well,
feel it
I mean,
already.
if need be, we could just. Okay. All right. Yeah. Right. So,
Ed told
yeah.
a joke that didn't land.
Once we get this working, you guys will be able to see the
Oh my
slides.
goodness.
And yeah.
I'm getting brain freeze, guys. Oh, almost there, Matt. Almost. We got infinite. Oh, I was hoping we were going to get infinite recession.
Yeah.
My goodness, this is just embarrassing. I'm gonna start skimming through here.
Thank
Okay.
All right.
Sorry, guys. I just couldn't actually keep
Resolved it,
drinking
yeah.
that long.
All right. Sounds
My drink is already almost done. So I'm gonna end up probably having to take 2 intermissions for that one. Because apparently, drink during technical difficulties was a really, really, really bad rule that I shouldn't implement, and I will now retract. Not doing that again. That was a mistake.
good. Perfect. Let's give Steve a round of applause, everybody.
Yay,
All right.
Steve.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So atheists all say, well, we've proven the Big Bang, Matt. You're putting forth primitive superstition.
I mean, I wouldn't use the word proved. It's been proved in sort of a colloquial sense, like, like the way that I might say, like, I proved that I didn't hit your car because, I have camera footage or whatever, which isn't proof in the same mathematical sense, but, like, it's been proved to the point where, like, there's really no rational reason to reject at least sort of broad strokes of the Big Bang. Now, of course, there's active research going on in sort of like the little details and whatnot, exactly what happened when, at what point. All that those are open questions. But yeah, the basics that the universe was in a hot, dense state and is now in a relatively cool and diffuse state, and that it has transitioned from one to the other, yeah, that's not in question at all. And, I mean, yeah, young Earth creationism is primitive superstition. It really is. It's on the same level as flat Earth.
We believe in the Big Bang, and it's been proven. Well, here's from NASA. It says, although the Big Bang theory is widely accepted, it will probably never be proven.
Yeah.
So the next time that some atheist says, we proved the Big Bang theory, NASA says it hasn't been proven.
Yeah, that's why people shouldn't use the word proof in terms of science. Because the thing is, technically, you never actually prove anything in science, except that you can prove some things. Well, you can't even really disprove things. You are more in the business of disconfirming, right? Finding good reasons to think that things aren't true. And largely by the process of elimination, you come to options that might be true and are very, very likely to be true based on the fact that they can't be falsified, but there's a lot of confirmation of things like predictions. So there you go.
And they say, consequentially, this leaves people with a lot of tough and unanswered questions.
Yeah, NASA, it should be consequently. But then again, I'm not even sure this is from NASA, so... Because look at the quality of Matt's citation here. This is NASA. NASA somewhere, sometime, in some context, said this to someone. Who knows? I have no idea how to look up that citation. I mean, it's not the craziest thing for someone from NASA to have said, but, like, that's not how you do citations, guys, right? Like, I'll bet if I said something and then my citation was just the Bible, Matt would not find that sufficient. The thing is, the Bible's a big book. I could say just about anything and then say, it's in the Bible. And most people wouldn't be immediately able to be like, no, it isn't. Or like, oh, yeah, it is. I remember that. Yeah. This is disingenuous.
So people say, well, I didn't find my answers in Christianity. I didn't find the answers that I was looking for in the Bible. I'm sorry, but NASA says that if you believe in the Big Bang, you have consequentially a number of tough and unanswered questions.
Yeah, that's what science is, right? So all scientific endeavors, right, have areas on the fringes of what's currently known where there are tough questions, because if they weren't tough, we'd probably have an answer for it. And someone makes Kenty's citations look good. That's a talent. Damn it, I know. Yeah, Robert Adsit says that, yeah, this makes Kent Hovind citations look good. It's true, it does. I mean, NASA is just not a citation. Now I lost my train of thought. Where was I? Goodness. Oh, right. So, like I was saying, at the edges of science, right, there's always stuff that we don't know. And those are the tough questions, because if they weren't that tough, we'd probably have already figured out a good answer. And but the thing is that no one is getting, like, their purpose in life or their moral philosophy from the Big Bang, right? with the possible exception of people who are getting their purpose in life from trying to find answers to some of these tough questions about the Big Bang, that might provide you some purpose in life. But ultimately, that's still an internally derived thing. Like, you've decided that that's going to be your purpose. So if someone isn't finding the answers that they want from Christianity about their purpose, their metaphysics, their morality, their spiritual fulfillment, all that stuff, I mean, they're not going to go looking for the Big Bang, right? They're going to look for other options that can provide things like this. So they might look at, you know, some kind of secular philosophy, like a secular humanist philosophy. They might try a different religion. They might try, you know, Buddhism or Judaism or Islam or Wicca or some kind of New Age group. But no one is going to be like, oh, because the universe started with an extremely small scale factor in a hot, dense state, I therefore know how to treat my fellow man. Thanks, Big Bang. Like, that's not a thing. And One for Null for $5 says, Kent doesn't realize the Big Bang Theory was theorized by a Belgian priest named Georges Lemaitre. I don't actually... I think Kent does know that. I don't know if Matt Powell does. And by the way, for those of you who are new, maybe didn't watch last episode, the reason that we are doing Matt Powell here is because Kent Hovind had him on for his creationist boot camp. And so, as a way to sort of break up the CSE 101 classes, which we have been slogging through for months now, we're doing a little bit of new stuff that Kent Hovind has put out. So this is from Kent Hovind's official YouTube channel. So, yeah.
And the reason they say that the Big Bang will probably never be proved
Is because it's science?
because it's not provable.
Because it's science?
Because it's not science.
Oh, because it's not science. No, it's because it is science, Matt, you colossal moron. Science literally can't prove things. It's not logically possible. It can't happen. So, yeah, there you go. Except, like I said, in sort of the loose colloquial sense, which doesn't really mean the same thing as proof in a logical sense.
Because it's not true. So the Bible says in the beginning...
No, there are plenty of things that are true that can't realistically be proven. In fact, basically outside of formal logic and mathematics, that includes everything that's true, right? So, for instance, if I say, oh, hey, I'm holding some Elmer's glue, well, I guess it's off-brand, Office Works brand glue, I don't know, whatever, in my hand, right? I'm holding up this squeezed bottle of glue. I could show you a picture of it. I could show up with, you know, this actual bottle and squirt it onto you or something. I could bring it to a lab and test what's in it, all that stuff. But the thing is, if you want to ultimately just retreat to solipsism, you can. There's no one who can disprove solipsism, which is the idea that you're the only thing that exists, and all your sensory information is just basically your mind playing tricks on you. And there's no way to disprove that, which means there's no way to prove that this bottle of glue exists, that I'm holding in my hand, allegedly. Okay, that's great. That doesn't mean it's not true that I have this bottle of off-brand Elmer's in my hand that I probably got at the grocery store. Right? That's not how we normally work. And the thing is, can you disprove solipsism? Can you prove the external world exists? No. But it's a reasonable first axiom to say that the external world exists and that your senses give you some kind of accurate perception of it. Can't prove it though, so sure.
God created the heavens and the earth. And so we went through this. Let's see here. But, you know, little children today, they get very confused by the public school system, and they start asking questions like, well, where did life come from? How did life get started?
You know, I don't remember asking that question because I feel like we talked about it before I really had the specific curiosity to ask that question. But hey, maybe there's kids that are way more curious out there. I hope so.
And so a lot of them go on their phones and they type in, where did life come from? And if you were to type that in, the first thing that pops up is that it rained down into the oceans.
Oh, hey, let's see if this is the same thing that comes up when I try it. So Matt says, where did life come from? All right, it is. There we go. So it starts with, how did life originate from understanding evolution at berkeley.edu? Experiments suggest that organic molecules could have been synthesized in the atmosphere of early Earth and rained down into the oceans. RNA and DNA molecules, genetic material for all life, are just long chains of simple nucleotides. Replicating molecules evolved and began to undergo natural selection. That's just the blurb that we get at the beginning. Let's see. Yeah, living things, even ancient organisms like bacteria, are enormously complex. However, all this complexity did not fully form from the primordial soup. Instead, life certainly originated in a series of small steps, each building upon the complexity that evolved previously. Simple organic molecules similar to nucleotides shown below are the building blocks of life and must have been involved in its origin. Experiments suggest that organic molecules could have been synthesized in the atmosphere, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, he's at least not bald-faced lying about what happens when you Google things. Now, I would be curious as to why he's not using Google Scholar to check on these scholarly topics. But hey.
So what evolution teaches is that life started from somebody's shower. That's
From somebody's... Okay, yep. I'm going to take a drink for ridiculous... I don't know if it's a joke or a straw man or what, but it was stupid.
literally what they think. But I'm sure you've seen these bumper stickers before. I know I have. Almost whoever has seen the Darwin fish on somebody's car.
Okay, one in the chat if you've seen a Darwin fish, two in the chat if you've never seen a Darwin fish on somebody's bumper.
Pretty much everybody. People in 2021 are fans of Charles Darwin.
I mean, I'm kind of a fan. He was a pretty good author. He was a bit long-winded in some places, but like that's just sort of the 19th century for you. He did a lot of cool work, not just in evolutionary biology, but he also did a lot of just straight-up descriptions of various organisms that he found in a lot of islands. And, you know, islands are a great place to go for brand new species. So, or not brand new species in the sense of they just recently evolved, but brand new in the sense of not previously formally described. So, yeah, it was pretty cool. But, I mean, I don't think that he's some kind of prophet of science. He got a lot of stuff wrong.
But anybody that puts these stickers on their car, it just goes to show they haven't even done the basic research.
Well, I will agree that many of them haven't. I don't think that you can determine that simply because they have that sticker. Now, I don't have such a sticker on my car because, I mean, I don't know. Look, you might not know this based on the fact that I have this channel, but like the fact that evolution is true isn't some source of like great emotional satisfaction for me. It's an intellectual thing, right? And we have a whole bunch of ones, but we have someone, Octavius Phoenix, who says never seen one. Man, you got to put in a 2. That's how it works. You put in a 2 if you haven't. But so I will take a drink also for Matt being basically correct. That yeah, people have seen these, are pretty common. So good job, Matt. You correctly reported that Darwin fish stickers are reasonably common.
Charles Darwin said this. He says, often a cold shudder has run through me, and I have asked myself whether I've devoted myself to a fantasy.
And check out that citation. I'm actually pretty sure this is from a letter that Charles Darwin wrote. But here's the thing. Let's say that Charles Darwin had completely abandoned the idea of the evolution by natural selection before his death, right? At any point before his death. Even like the day after the publication of The Origin of Species, right? Let's just say that that's the case. It doesn't matter. It doesn't make evolution any more or less true. It has zero bearing. And the thing is, I honestly think, because I've been asked before, like, why do creationists prop up these historical scientists as if they're like the god of evolution or something, right? That we have to believe everything they say. And I think it's because, at least in the Abrahamic traditions, there's a big emphasis on prophets who come down, deliver the word of God, and there it is. That's the word of God. And then because they think of science as a competing religion, even though it's not at all a competing religion, they still think of it that way. So they think that science is about these great men like Isaac Newton and Charles Darwin and Albert Einstein who come down and proclaim the word of science, and thus saith the science. And we then have to believe everything they said until a new prophet comes along and proclaimeth the word of science. But that's not what happens. Scientific progress is mostly the result of men and women toiling largely anonymously in labs, in the field, looking through raw numbers, doing math, designing experiments, writing papers that you're never going to read or hear of unless you're already in the field. And there you go. And the thing is, when we do get these big names, their work is still scrutinized and tested, and usually some or much of it ends up being shown to not actually be right, or at least not be fully the explanation that we need. So, for instance, was Newton wrong about his laws of motion? Well, technically, yeah. Technically, the relativistic formulae are what we should be using to be getting the correct predictions. However, in most scales that humans deal with, the corrections provided by Einstein are going to be within the the error margin of any measurement instrument you're going to be using to measure various physical properties. So it doesn't really matter, right? Newton gets you close enough for most things. So Newton wasn't wrong, he was just incomplete. Now, there were a few things Charles Darwin was wrong about, like he was wrong about gemmules, which he thought were these little particles of inheritance that were shed by every part of the body, and included all the information about that part of the body that would be needed to build such a part, right? He was wrong about that. Wasn't wrong about natural selection, though.
So, Dr. Hovind, if I got up here and said, it's been good giving this creation seminar here, brother, but I'm afraid that I'm living in a fantasy, would you trust anything that I'm saying?
Well, I already don't trust anything that he's saying. So, I mean, good question. But here's the thing, though. Someone saying that I'm afraid that I'm living in a fantasy just means that someone has self-doubt. And self-doubt is a good thing, right? Without self-doubt, you never correct yourself. I would be much less willing to trust someone who said, I have absolute confidence in everything that I have ever said, and I have never been wrong, and there isn't even a possibility that I could be wrong. That is someone I would not trust. Someone who says, sometimes I get really nervous that I just am spouting nonsense. Like, it's a concern of mine. Good. That means you're looking into it. That means that if you're wrong, there's a chance you're going to find out and fix it. So yeah, whatever Ken Hovind, I'm going to go ahead and predict that Ken Hovind is going to say he wouldn't trust Matt if he didn't have a level of narcissism akin to Kent's, where he can't possibly be wrong.
Do I even really believe what I'm saying? So when people...
Yes, you believe what you're saying, otherwise you wouldn't say that you're afraid it's a fantasy. If you didn't believe what you were saying, you wouldn't worry about that, because you'd already know, and then you would just go on being a liar. Taking a drink on that one.
Say, oh, Darwin was some great scientific mind. Darwin was afraid that he was living in a fantasy land.
Yeah, as well he should have been.
Who wants to trust somebody like that?
Me.
Why don't you trust Jesus? The
I'm not saying I don't trust Jesus, but those are separate questions.
one who's the same yesterday, today, and forever, who said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. He spoke in absolutes. Darwin said, well, I'm afraid I'm living in a fantasy. Who wants to trust that?
Again, that's what science is all about, and the reason that science is reliable is because it updates with new data that shows old ideas are unlikely to be true and newer ideas might be.
Definitely not me. Cursed is the man that trusteth in man. Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the
I noticed that for the Bible, he can actually give us a real citation. That's nice.
Father, but by me. Let's pause here for a second.
Okay, 1,000.
Atheists all say, Matt Powell and Dr. Kent Hovind, well, they never call him Dr. Hovind.
Yeah, there's a reason for that. It's because he doesn't have a doctorate degree. In fact, actually, someone in my audience here was just recently reading over his doctoral thesis and reminded me that it doesn't have... Let me pull up the messages I was sent. So give me a second. So, no proper title, no table of contents, no research, no footnotes, no bibliography, and only one reviewer. Now, I don't know if anyone here has gone through the trouble of trying to get a PhD, but your thesis in any actual school capable of issuing a PhD is going to require that your thesis have an actual title, contain a table of contents, that you have actually done research. I know, crazy, right? They're going to require that you have footnotes and a bibliography, and chances are they're not going to accept extended stretches of poetry unless you're doing an English Lit PhD. So, yeah. Anyway, now that we've established why people don't call Kent Hovind Dr. Kent Hovind.
Not how
Oh, yeah, the Venerable Bee points out that my paper for bachelor's is better source than this. Yes, me too. I did a, one of the last things I had to do for my bachelor's degree before I basically just finished off the elective that I had been neglecting for the entire time, was I wrote a 20-something page paper with original research from manuscripts in the Boston Public Library Department of Rare Books and Manuscripts. And yeah, that is already a much, much better instance of academic research and writing than anything Kent Hovind has ever published in his entire life.
in Kent Hovind, they have strawmanned our position because they are saying that we think that life started from a rock.
Well, you do say that a lot, and no one does say that.
Well, this just came out 2 months ago. It says rare meteorite that fell on a UK driveway may contain ingredients for life.
Yeah, Matt, may contain ingredients for life, right? So if I said, hey, or if you said, hey, how did you make this cake? And I said, well, I grabbed some eggs from the carton and I grabbed some flour from this bag of flour. And you're like, hold up. You think cake comes from cartons and bags? That's ridiculous. And it's like, no, but I do think that bags and cartons contain the ingredients which can later become a cake. Like, well, I mean, you just said it. You said you got the flour and the eggs from a bag and a carton. So you just think that cakes just spring forth out of cartons and bags. That's the exact same thing that's happening right now. This rock may have contained within it, not itself, it may have contained as a thing enclosing these quote-unquote ingredients for life.
So they say, well, we don't believe we came from a rock. Isn't that kind of insinuating that you did?
No, it's not. It's not even close.
They say, well, it contained the ingredients for life.
Yeah, as a container.
And in that rock was liquid water.
Well, I mean, in some rocks there's liquid water. I don't think that one had liquid water. Not sure where he's getting this.
Great.
Oh, okay. This is a different article. It says, two rocks that created something, Earth from space in... Oh, that crashed to... sorry. Two rocks that crashed to Earth from space in 1998 are the first meteorites found to contain both liquid water and a mix of complex organic compounds such as hydrocarbons and amino acids. Oh, hey, there you go. Maybe there has been a significant amounts of water found in some asteroids. That's pretty cool.
You know, there's a lot of things that contain ingredients for life. In fact, if I was to take a fish and put it in a blender and blend it up, those are all the ingredients for life.
Yup.
I don't expect the fish to assemble itself back together and start swimming around again.
Nor does anyone else. And even if you then took all of those, bits of life and were to isolate them in a sterile environment where there isn't other competing life that's just going to gobble them up, and then you provided the various substrates that have generally been proposed as necessary for abiogenesis, you still wouldn't get them to reassemble into fish. But also, you would probably have to sterilize all the bacteria that were already in there first in order to get abiogenesis, as opposed to simply anything even close being immediately outcompeted by all the bacteria. Because remember, a lot of what happens in decay is internal bacteria that were always there. So, the fact that currently, under current conditions, blendered fish doesn't come back to become a full-fledged fish is neither surprising nor a problem for abiogenesis.
So these types, they evolutionists, I've always said that it's impossible to defend evolution honestly. Every one of these.
It's funny because I say the same thing about creationism, except I couch it with the option that you might simply be ignorant. So I'm willing to give much more of a benefit of the doubt to creationists than Matt is to people who aren't creationists, to people who know what they're talking about, or just people who disagree with him.
These con men on YouTube that come out against us and against.
Ooh, I think that's me. I think Matt Powell, who has already here demonstrated he doesn't know what he's talking about, is accusing me of being a con man. I'm going to take a drink in celebration of having been called out.
against creation apologists. They're con men, and frankly, they don't.
Guys, anyone here who has sent me any money, you guys have been conned. I definitely didn't use it to help keep this channel going. I used it to lie to you, and I spent it on, I guess, I don't know, just fancy phones and watches. Yep, that's it.
About people. And I mean it when I say that, because they've researched these things. They know that these things exist. And one of those things.
I have researched these things. I do know that this exists. He's right. I'm going to take a drink for it. Do dinosaur ears burn? Yeah, they can.
This is dinosaur soft tissue. That's a small picture up there of some soft tissue that was discovered. Dinosaur blood with hemoglobin still in the cells. And that's...
No. There was hemoglobin found in areas that were morphologically consistent with blood vessels in association with structures that were morphologically consistent with red blood cells. Even Mary Schweitzer says the data, who is the person who discovered this, by the way, says that the data does not currently support a positive identification of these structures as blood.
Just ask this question. Who here thinks that 65 million years, because this is when this thing died, 68 million years ago, who thinks that T-Rex blood could last for 68 million years?
Well, no one's claiming it's blood, but let's poll the chat. Matt Powell's apparently a big fan of polling the audience, so we're going to poll the audience right now. Put 1 in the chat if you think that soft tissue can persist for 68 million or more years. Put 2 in the chat if you think it can't, under any circumstances. So we'll see how that goes in the chat. But unfortunately, early, because of me deciding that it was a stupid, deciding that it was a good idea when in fact it was a stupid idea, to just drink continuously during technical difficulties, I am basically out of beverage. So I will be back shortly, and I will let the intermission run while I come back and, or while I'm, grabbing a beverage and coming back. So, yeah. Here we go. All right. Well, I finished grabbing that drink before we really need to get through the entire intermission video. So, there you go. Let's see. We got a whole bunch of 1s, a 2, and a 3. So, okay. Thank you very much. So, most of us do think that it's possible for this to last longer than 68 million years, because, I mean, it obviously did. Although I am curious what Shinra Final Fantasy VII is why that person is going for 2. And of course we have Zach Brannigan going 3. So, get a little variety. All right, well, let's continue on now that I have a fresh beverage with some more Matt Powell crazy talk.
Nobody in their right mind, nobody with any scientific literacy, nobody with half a brain, or even half a brain cell would say, oh, I just believe that blood could last for millions and millions of years.
Well, I mean, so here's the thing, right? No one can be an expert in every field. So you can have scientific literacy in a general sense, but not know the, say, exact details of this toponymy. Or you might not know, you might have a detailed, intimate knowledge of how, say, like, chemical synthesis works in laboratory settings. But you might have absolutely no idea how particle physics works in terms of, like, Big Bang cosmology. It doesn't make you not scientifically illiterate. And the appropriate thing to do in those cases is generally, unless you have extremely good reason to think otherwise, say that the scientific consensus of the people who do have expertise in that area is probably our best bet as of now. Can you prove that? No. Are you really able to explain to others? No. It is essentially a non-fallacious version of the appeal to authority, because the non-fallacious appeal to authority is one that doesn't actually prove an argument, but it provides evidence that an argument is reasonable. So the non-fallacious version of the argument from authority says, hey, These people that I'm referencing are actual experts in the field we're discussing. They, as well as the consensus of experts in the field, say that X is the most likely explanation for the phenomenon we're talking about. Therefore, it is likely that they are correct, or at least that they have the best chance of being correct out of all of our options. That is not fallacious, right? That's no more fallacious than saying, hey, my car is making a funny sound and I took it to the mechanic and he says it's this. Well, unless you're a better mechanic than he is, chances are the mechanic's right. And if you shop it around to like 5 different mechanics and they all give you the same answer, well, that's probably the answer, even though technically that doesn't prove it. Because the thing is, again, science isn't generally about proof. It's about, it's not about consensus, but the consensus for non-lay people can be evidence of the broad truth of a topic, or a position, sorry. And that consensus is itself based on extensive evidence. So there you go. But also, all the scientific people who are literate in this area are not finding this to be extraordinarily unlikely. Now, there was a lot of controversy, especially at first, and there is still a bit, but we do now have preservation mechanisms that seem reasonably likely to keep this preserved. And the other thing is, our options are, in this circumstance, 1, there is some way to preserve these tissues for 68 million years. 2, Mary Schweitzer is mistaken in her findings. Or 3, everything we know about physics, chemistry, biology, cosmology is all just wrong. I don't know about you guys, but I think options 1 and 2 are more likely than everything about science is obviously wrong. Which is the conclusion that Matt Powell wants to bring us down. That's what he wants us to have as our conclusion.
But Mary Schweitzer, who made the discovery,
and who's a Christian and former young Earth creationist,
she was forced to come up with a mechanism for how.
She wasn't forced to come up with a mechanism. No one was standing there threatening to beat her if she didn't come up with a mechanism. However, an unusual finding demands a mechanism. And I don't know if you guys know this, but scientists usually have to look for a question, right? Like, you have to think up, what question do I want to answer with my research? And sometimes it's easy, but sometimes it isn't, right? Sometimes, finding a really good question to answer is a really cool thing. I know this from my work in history, right? It's not always easy to come up with the next great question to answer in history. And so when I had to do original research, I had to find something that hadn't been adequately answered. And it turns out that one of the things that hadn't been adequately answered, in my opinion, was the origin of some of the intellectual development of the various abolitionist parties leading up to the formation of the Republican Party in the years before the Civil War. So I dived into some manuscripts from a writer who I know had contact with those parties to see what I could get from his correspondence and newspaper clippings about him and whatnot regarding how he was interacting with the known founders of various abolitionist parties. It turns out it was quite extensively, and they actually drew a lot of their ideas from his writings. So I wrote that up as a paper, because there was a question. Mary Schweitzer, similarly, stumbled upon an excellent question. We have bones that we know from a combination of stratigraphy and radiometric dating are tens of millions of years old. We also are finding what appears to be soft tissue. How does that fit together? Well, there you go. That's the problem. That's a problem for you to solve. No one was forcing her to do this. This is an opportunity.
How this thing lasted. The evolutionists got all mad at her.
No, some of them disbelieved her. And I'm not saying that there isn't heated discussion in science, but no one threatened her job. No one said she wasn't a real scientist. There were people who disagreed, which is good. That's the job of a good scientist, is to disagree with controversial claims and point out the reasons they're probably not true. Because that, if they are true, the things you point out will be the hurdles that a new idea has to overcome in order to become the consensus. And if we didn't have that, then would we just have a crazy kaleidoscope of any new nonsense that anyone just happened to come up with? Because while science does change, it only changes when it has to.
And said, how dare you make this discovery?
No one said that.
How was it preserved in millions of years? And she
Yes, that is a good question. But asking the question isn't denigrating the discovery. Now, there were people who said the discovery wasn't authentic and they had other options, like later bacterial biofilm buildup and things like that, or infiltration of other things, like you can have fungus infiltrate fossils, plant roots, small insects that can explain how you're getting some kind of, animal specific proteins and things like that that can explain why you're finding collagen. So, yeah, there were other options.
She says, well, let's do some tests. So she puts dinosaur blood inside of iron and she encapsulates the blood.
Okay, hold on. I'm taking a drink because this is hilarious. So Matt Powell here is admitting that Mary Schweitzer put dinosaur blood into these experiments, but what she actually did was use bird blood, which is dinosaur blood. So in a roundabout way, Matt Powell is already admitting that birds are dinosaurs, which is something that he not that long ago, if you can see it on my channel, made a video talking about how ridiculous that is. So that whole thing is fun right there. Matt Powell, you've just admitted that you were wrong. By the way, that video he did is privated, and I did a response to it that premiered on Vice Rhino's channel. And actually, I'm going to be asking him probably today or tomorrow if he minds me uploading it and premiering it on my channel. Well, it's already uploaded to my channel, honestly. But if he minds me premiering it at some point, obviously with links to the original upload on his channel. So I expect he'll say yes.
And iron. And lo and behold, the iron would preserve the blood cells. Iron preserves blood.
Well, it wouldn't necessarily preserve all of the components of the blood, but yes, it did significantly, and I mean essentially stop, at this timescale we can test, the decay.
So they're like, hooray, we found the preservation technique. This is how it lasted for 65 million years.
Well, no, it was a preservation technique that probably has some viability for this particular discovery. The thing is, in science, when you find a viable option, you don't declare that you found the way it happened, right? But what you can say is that you can now largely rule out the idea that it's impossible, right? That's one of the reasons why the ideas like irreducible complexity are such weak arguments. Because you don't have to find out how something evolved in order to say that it could have. You just have to find one plausible mechanism. And once you do, boom, it can have evolved, even if it didn't evolve that way. Similarly, if you can find any preservation mechanism that keeps soft tissue preserved for 68 million years, say, now you know it can happen. But you don't know that that's exactly how it happened. It just means you can't rule out the possibility that it did happen. But we already know that we couldn't rule out that possibility because, again, the evidence that the bones are 68 million years old is overwhelming in terms of the stratigraphy, which has been relatively dated via index fossils and then absolutely dated via radiometric dating.
What are you talking about? If something dies in nature, who sees dead organisms magically getting encapsulated by iron when they die?
Okay, so I'm going to take a drink. The idea isn't that they're encapsulated in a bunch of like iron ore. The idea is that in some areas, the soil is higher in iron than normal. And as a result of chemical leaching into fossils, sometimes concentrations of iron can build up enough to preserve. And in fact, in the bones in question, there was higher than normal iron concentrations. So there you go.
When something dies in nature, it deteriorates.
Yep. And you'll notice how we don't have the whole body there, Matt. So this also deteriorated.
Since when does anything in nature die and get covered by iron by nature?
Well, this T-Rex in question did, at least in the way that Mary Schweitzer is proposing it did. So we know what happened at least once.
Doesn't happen.
Yes, it does.
So they're in their imagination, they're like, well, iron could preserve it. Hooray, we found a way to still prove evolution.
No, we found an explanation for one otherwise anomalous result that didn't challenge evolution. It challenged our understanding of taphonomy. And by the way, for those of you who don't know, because taphonomy is not like an everyday word, people aren't talking about taphonomic artifacts around the breakfast table. Taphonomy is a scientific study of how fossils form and explaining how fossils that we find formed in the past.
I'm sorry, this discovery that she made was nowhere near iron deposits.
Well, the only thing I have to say there is citation needed, because Mary seemed to disagree.
But to say, oh, well, iron is what's preserving it, iron is in the blood cells preserving them.
Which, by the way, is another thing that she brought up, which was that given very good preservation, regardless of extrinsic iron, intrinsic iron may persist long enough to help preserve some biomolecules as molecular fossils, in which the iron actually replaces some of the other molecules in the original proteins, making a chemical that is similar to the original protein, but is much, much more durable.
It's ridiculous. Even if you put dinosaur soft tissue in an airtight jar and put that airtight jar in another airtight jar and another airtight jar, deep time will always cause things to deteriorate.
Actually, you know what? In a vacuum, in an airtight jar, in an airtight jar, in an airtight jar, buried in the earth, and it will degrade to some extent. But yeah, I think it's actually going to preserve pretty well, Matt. So I'll tell you what. Let's test it. Let's bury some organic material that's been vacuum sealed in a jar, that's been vacuum sealed in a jar, that's been vacuum sealed in a jar. And we'll wait 20, 30, 40, whatever years, and we'll dig it up every once in a while. And with no light coming in, no bacteria really being active, no nothing, I'm pretty sure that it'll work just like a vacuum sealer. Because here's the thing, right? Vacuum sealers are a real thing that's used in industrial food preparation to preserve fresh food for very long periods of time. That's already a thing that humans are using as a technique. But it does require you to keep these things in a place that doesn't have lots of light streaming in, right? Especially not sunlight. So yeah, if it's underground, I actually do think that it will last a very long time.
So it doesn't matter. You say, oh, preservation techniques. It doesn't matter. Anytime an evolutionist says, well, Brother Powell or Mr. Powell.
Hey, people who accept evolution can also call Matt Powell Brother Powell, generally assuming they're Christians, because that's a thing that you find a lot with Christians calling each other brother or sister. And not even most Christians, but whatever. So I don't rule out the possibility that a quote-unquote evolutionist could legitimately call Matt Powell Brother Powell, although I would feel icky calling him my brother, not because he's a Christian, but because he's an actual genocidal maniac.
Or whoever you are, if they say, well, it could be preserved by, just shrug them off. The moment they say the word preserved, just shrug them off because they don't know what they're talking about.
Or if you're somewhat... Okay, this is such stupid advice. I'm taking a drink. Let's say Matt Powell is correct, and there is no viable preservation mechanism at all, and that for that reason, these bones have to be younger than millions of years. Let's just say that that's true, right? What he is saying is, even though you are right about this and someone else is misinformed, if they're misinformed, completely ignore them. I mean, this is supposed to be a thing to help people be able to use creation, quote-unquote, science as an apologetic. But if your first response to anyone giving you any pushback on one of your points is just be like, all right, well, forget you. How is that ever going to help you? Of course, if anyone actually thinks that these soft tissue findings are from bones from, 68 plus million years ago, then of course they're going to think it could be preserved. What other possible stance could you take? But if you're going to just dismiss those people, you're never going to have an actual dialogue with the people that you claim to want to help, Matt.
Organic material really can only last a maximum of about 10,000 years. Now, let's get into what evolution teaches, because evolutionists, and I suppose you all have heard this, they'll say, well, you creationists are afraid to give our side because people will leave Christianity in the droves.
What?
If you show them evolution.
Hold on, that whole sentence didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I have to listen to that again, sorry.
Because they don't know what they're talking about. Organic material really can only last a maximum of about 10,000 years. Now, let's get into what evolution teaches, because evolutionists, this, and I suppose you all have heard this, they'll say, well, you creationists are afraid to give our side because you
Okay.
know people will leave Christianity in the droves if you show them evolution.
I actually don't think that that's necessarily true. I know a lot of Christians who are perfectly accepting of evolution and science in general. It is not a dichotomy between evolution and Christianity. The person who was scheduled to be here, Maddie, as well as Brent Hovind, are both Christians. So I did actually plan this episode as a 2 Christians and 1 I'm not telling, but Christian is still a part of the option there, versus Matt Powell, a Christian. So this was originally supposed to be between 3 and 4 Christians, one of whom was Matt Powell, and the other 2 to 3 of whom were, let's say, his intellectual opponents. Although that makes me feel sad that someone that pathetic is an opponent of mine. Sort of like playing chess with a baby. Like, yeah, would you win that game? It's not really something to be proud of. Or like my nephew, who I taught to play chess a couple years ago, and like I kept leaving him openings, and he just kept not taking them. So eventually, I was like, well, I'm gonna have to win this game eventually. So, you know, I would then go and win it. But like, yeah, that's not exactly something I'm proud of. I don't be like, oh, hey guys, I beat a 6-year-old at chess like 5 times in a row. But anyway, yeah, no, it's not a Christian versus evolution thing. It's an evolution versus young Earth. Well, just generally creationism, right? But you don't have to be a creationist in the sense that Matt Powell wants you to be one to be a Christian. But it is also the case that it is suspicious that creationists continuously, routinely, and in many cases deliberately strawman and obfuscate, there's a word, evolution, and it does make them look weak. It makes them look like they know that they can't be right, and in fact, I think a lot of them do in fact know that. I think Matt Powell, I'm not sure about him, right? Because Matt Powell says stuff that is just so dumb, like when he talked about the air in space is different, and that's why the sun can keep burning, because there's air there, and, you know, it needs oxygen to keep burning, because apparently Matt Powell thinks the sun is a big ball of coal that's on fire. So, out of all the professional creationists, Matt Powell is the only one who I think might actually be so dumb that he can actually be honest about this. But I'm not sure.
Well, people often ask me, how do you get people to doubt evolution? 3-word Google search. When monkeys surfed. Just feel free to type it in on your phone. I won't judge.
Okay, here we go. Whenever Matt Powell tells me to type something in, I'm probably going to do it. When monkeys surfed. Here we go. When monkeys surfed to South America, National Geographic. At about 36 million years ago, or sorry, 36 million years before today, a raft of monkeys found themselves adrift in the Atlantic. They'd been blown out to sea by an intense storm that had ripped up the African coast, and now a mat of floating vegetation was the closest thing to land for miles in all directions. But luck was with them. Thanks to favorable currents, they were thrown onto the beach of a new continent, South America. I'll admit that scenario... Oh, come on. Now they want me to give me their email address to keep reading. No, I don't want to give you my email address, National Geographic. I'll admit that this scenario... jerks. Whatever. So we're talking about floating vegetation mats.
Jim. These are the first things that...
Wait, a vegetation mat? That describes this mat's intellectual capacity. Ayo! Sorry, I know that was bad. I'll see myself out by continuing with the stream.
pop up. When monkeys surfed to South America, BBC. The monkeys that sailed across the Atlantic to South America. Monkeys suddenly appeared in South America about 40 million years ago. Unlikely though it may seem, they probably sailed there from Africa.
Yeah. Yep, but not in the sense that they got in a sailboat or on a surfboard. Like I said, if you read the articles, they talk about floating vegetation mats after a storm, which is a thing we observe in real life right now. Animals clinging to such vegetation mats and, in fact, entering new areas that they hadn't previously been in. One famous example is the island of Anguilla, which is part of the British Overseas Territories in the Bahamas, where there had been no green iguanas in any recorded history anywhere on the island or in the fossil record. No evidence that green iguanas had ever lived in Anguilla. But then in the 90s, after a storm, some green iguanas washed on shore, and now there's a whole bunch of them. And guess what they washed on shore on? Yeah, vegetation mats. Plus, Matt Powell rejecting vegetation mats, which are one of the standard explanations as to how animals got around the world after Noah's Ark landed, is a little ridiculous, because now it just means he has one less mechanism to explain how animals got to where they are today after the flood of Noah. He could just accept vegetation mats and then help them with his explanations of the flood. But no.
So evolution teaches that monkeys literally surfed across the ocean.
Well, again, not on a surfboard or doing, like hanging 10 or anything. They were clinging for dear life onto a vegetation mat across an Atlantic Ocean that 40 million years ago was much, much smaller than it is now.
34 million years ago, 40 million years ago. They can't even come up with a consistent number.
Oh no, there are date ranges for the arrival of primates into South America. It's all over, guys. Pack it up. Let's go home. I guess Matt Powell is right, because there are date ranges. Uncertainty exists in scientific measurements, so you know what? Forget the whole game.
Prehistoric monkeys traveled 900 miles on rafts between continents. And then it says here they must have managed. It says, well, the researchers from the University of Southern California say they must have managed to hitch a lift on floating rafts. Folks, this is the crowd that wants to tell you that the Bible's inferior.
Well, I'll tell you what, when the Bible comes up with a plausible mechanism that has been observed actually happening right now to explain the arrival of primates in South America, let me know. Now, having read the Bible, I don't think it has such an explanation, because I don't remember it in there, and it feels like the kind of thing that might have stood out, because I'm not going to claim I remember everything that's in the Bible, because I don't. However, there were definitely things that stood out to me, and I feel like that would be one of them. But I don't remember it in there. Now, if anyone else does remember where in the Bible it explains how monkeys got to South America, please let me have the Bible reference, because I'll check it out. I'm perfectly happy to be proven wrong. In fact, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and say that if the Bible unambiguously describes how monkeys got to South America in a way that actually explains the biogeography of modern simiiforms, I will openly declare myself a Christian on air, and assuming that I need such things, I will show any kind of entry sacraments into Christianity, such as baptism, with a face reveal on air on this channel. So, yeah. So the options are, I could be, if you can show me the biblical reference, one of the following things will happen. I'll be on air baptized, or confirmed, or chrismated, or undergo some whatever reconciliation, or I'll simply declare that I've been a Christian all along. Ha 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 ha. So there you go. If you want to see any of those things happen, let me know where in the Bible it explains how monkeys got to South America.
They can't even do the basic research on what they believe. And when I brought this up to them...
What do you mean they can't do the basic research? This isn't like, okay, so the consensus that monkeys went from Africa to South America is pretty strong, since, that's kind of where the closest relatives of South American primates live, is in Africa. And also, we know that the seas were smaller there, so there had to be a way for them to get there, especially since they show up without a previous fossil record in South America. So, yeah. Oh, and Smitty says, don't be too hasty. Validating the Bible could be the first step to validating Islam. I mean, look, if Islam is valid and you can show it to me, I'll go be a Muslim. I mean, whatever, right? If you can actually demonstrate the validity and truth of a particular religion, why would I not accept it? That would be crazy. That would be literally crazy. So if I were given sufficient evidence to believe Islam, I would become a Muslim. I mean, look, if you can do it for me on air, I'll say my Shahada on air. I don't care. I could say the Shahada right now if I wanted to.
What's the first thing they said? Matt Powell's lying. Matt Powell's lying. He's...
So, unlike Kent Hovind, I'm actually not sure that Matt Powell's lying. I do actually think he might just be a colossal moron.
making this up, that we don't believe in surfing monkeys.
Well, I mean, that's kind of true, right? But that's the thing. When they say surfing, they're using it as like a clickbait title. What they actually mean is monkeys clinging to vegetation mats, which we already know because he's read enough of the articles on air to know that that's what they're actually talking about. So when they say we don't believe in surfing monkeys, what people are picturing is you telling them that you think that they think, I know we're getting a little bit inception-y there, but that they think that monkeys hopped on surfboards and said, "Cowabunga, dude," and then rode the surfboards across the ocean, which is not what anyone thinks.
But then a guy recently put out a video. He says, well, you know what? I researched it, Matt. Surfing monkeys,
A guy, no name, thanks.
surfing dinosaurs, it's perfectly plausible.
Yeah, it is, as long as what you mean by surfing is clinging to vegetation mats.
Perfectly plausible.
I really hope that Matt Powell is going to give us a reason beyond his own incredulity, why this isn't happening.
And so I put out a response and I kind of laughed at the guy. Just put
Yeah, so you use your own personal incredulity as an argument. Unsurprising. I'm going to take a drink on that one.
some laughter in the background because, you know, the Bible says the
Oh, and a laugh track. Even I don't use laugh tracks. That is like super lowbrow. Laugh tracks. And, Matt, you're not making a sitcom in like the late 80s to mid 90s. Actually, I guess from like the 50s into like the mid 90s. Oh man, I'm so happy laugh tracks are gone.
Lord will mock them. So I'm just trying to follow in the footsteps of Christ.
Yeah, I remember all those times that whenever someone asked Jesus to defend his position, he just said, "You moron." Like, you remember that time when Jesus and his disciples were gathering grain in a field that had been, left behind by the original harvesters, and they were doing it on the Sabbath. And so the Pharisees said, "Hey, how come you're harvesting grain on the Sabbath?" And Jesus said, "You idiot." That's what I remember. I believe it said, and Jesus said, "Lo, I say unto you, you're dumb." I'm pretty sure that's in the Bible. Pretty sure.
And I laughed at him. He goes, well, that's not an argument, Matt.
And it's not.
Here's the thing. They think that dinosaurs crossed oceans.
Yes. Matt, you have to give an argument. Oh my goodness, this whole time he's just going to use his own personal incredulity. The thing is, I can just be personally incredulous about anything that you claim. And now we're at an impasse. That's why science doesn't use personal incredulity. That's why when those scientists who were saying that Mary Schweizer's findings were probably wrong, when they said that, they didn't just use incredulity. They gave other options that they think were more likely.
The first duck-billed dinosaur fossil discovered in Africa. They think that rats crossed the Atlantic, surfing rats. This is just bonkers. Now, the reason, Damien, go ahead. Well, they think that this is the new theory because we called them out.
Oh, we got a drink from Mothra, our first kaiju of the evening. This is a lot longer than it usually takes. Well, there you go.
On it. And the new theory, they updated it because it's ever changing. Remember, there's people who are ever changing, never able to come to the knowledge of the truth.
Oh my goodness, science updates its understanding in the light of new evidence. The horror. Take a drink for how stupid Matt's objection to that is. My goodness. You guys, I hope someone comes on with me next week when we continue with this video, because I don't know if I can take this.
And they say, well, they must have managed to find stops along the way.
No, that's probably not it. So here's the thing, right? There's probably a maximum range for rafting that the modern Atlantic Ocean probably exceeds, because we're not actually getting any more instances of animals growing between Africa and South America. Like, it's not like African porcupines are washing on shore in South America and starting to displace native South American porcupines, which, by the way, those two groups of rodents are only distantly related, and they develop their quills independently. That's why South American, as well as North American, which are actually just one particular species of South American porcupines. So the South American porcupines have like barbs on their quills, and their quills are sort of like evenly distributed across most of their coat, except for like their hand or their head and like limbs. Whereas African porcupines have unbarbed quills that are concentrated around the posterior end of the body. That's one of the reasons why you have these vast differences between them, because they're not actually close related groups of rodents. So it looks like some rodents ended up washing on to South America and becoming the are becoming the ancestors of caviomorphs and porcupines, whereas the rest of rodentia stayed in the old world, and some other group of them became the what you call it, the porcupines there, while a third group of probably Eurasian or maybe African rodents came over to North America, which at the time wasn't connected to South America, and became the North American rodents, or maybe they migrated across the Bering Strait land bridge at some point. I don't know exactly about the biogeography there, but biogeography is cool and can help us determine things like, when did certain things arrive places, how did they do it, all this. But as far as surviving the trip, you can probably only survive a trip of a few days. But the thing is, remember, you can go a few days without water, and you can go a few weeks without food. And the same is often true for other animals, right? Like, if you don't feed a rat for a few days, it's not going to die. It's not going to have a fun time, but it's not going to die. Especially if it just kind of sits there, which is all it basically can do on a vegetation mat. It's going to sit there and be tired until it washes on shore and it can find something to eat. So, yeah, they probably just had to tough it out for a few days, which sucks. I mean, I don't want to get stuck on a vegetation mat for 3 days, hoping that I land somewhere. But, I mean, we know it can happen today, so...
That's the theory now, is that they found stops
No, it's
along
not.
the way. They must have...
That's something some guy told you because he didn't actually know, and he came up with a not entirely implausible option, right? It's not the option I would have chosen, because it's not very well supported, but yeah.
found some type of vegetation. So,
What do you mean they found some type of vegetation? They were on some type of vegetation, Matt. Right? So at least the herbivorous animals can get a little bit of sustenance from the floating vegetation they're literally sat on. The big problem is the water. The water is going to be the limiting factor, right?
did men's beards evolve to absorb a punch to the jaw?
I don't know.
Evolution has to explain, because the burden of proof's on them. So, Brother Taylor, the reason that you have a beard in evolution is because your primate ancestors were jacked in the jaw so much, where to the point where natural selection had to create a cushion in our face. I mean, that is weird.
I mean, I don't actually have any particular stance on that being the cause for human males developing more facial hair than human females, but like it's not the least likely scenario I can think up. But also, it could just have been sexual selection. Like maybe human females just found it sexy, so some populations of humans developed bigger beards. And the thing is, some populations of humans today, the males basically don't grow beards anyway. So it's not like it's a common human trait that all humans have, but like, whatever. I'm not going to stake like my acceptance of evolution on the likelihood of this one hypothesis about beards in one species.
This is not just, it's not just unscientific, folks.
What is unscientific about that?
What they believe, it's weird.
I mean, it's a bit of a weird option, but like, I don't see why it's unscientific. And while it isn't super plausible to me, because again, I actually don't think that that's a huge selection advantage, because you got to realize that the claim you would be making here is that what I see as fairly small reduction in force, onto the jaw provided by a thick beard is going to actually have a measurable effect on reproductive fitness, and that seems a bit far-fetched, but it's completely scientific. You can do things like you can make experiments to test how much force is actually reduced by a beard when taking a punch onto the jaw, and then you can extrapolate and say, okay, well, a broken jaw is actually been a pretty dangerous thing in terms of your long-term survival, and so you can come up with estimates as to say, in the Paleolithic, how likely are you to simply have died at the point of getting a broken jaw without being able to further reproduce? What kind of fitness effects do we see from that? Do we see more beards in areas where we have more archaeological evidence of prehistoric violence than others? Do people in areas where beards are common, thick beards, like say Europe, people from Europe tend to have thicker beards than say people from Far East Asia? Do we find in the archaeological record fewer instances of broken jaws in Europe than Far East Asia? Well, seeing similar amounts of violence overall in the archaeological record? You can test these things. And that's what makes it scientific. You can test and falsify the hypothesis.
It's not just unscientific. So by all these punches to the face, somehow we have this perfect jaw or cushion. So that if
Well, I wouldn't call it perfect. I'm pretty sure people with beards can still break their jaws, but okay.
we get punched again, we'll be okay.
So you're living dangerously.
I am. I must have been a weakling back in my ancestry.
Somehow I feel like Matt Powell's current lack of beard is more an affectation that he uses for cosmetic reasons than the actual natural state of his facial hair. But what do I know? Maybe Matt just has a really, really low testosterone level.
I can't grow a beard.
Oh, well, apparently he's just got a really low testosterone level. That's what I'm going with.
They really teach this. This just came out.
So, no, some people have proposed it. This isn't a they that is teaching a general consensus about the evolution of beards. That's not how this works.
This is new stuff. They say, Matt, stop making arguments from the creationists from the 90s. Well, I love
I mean, if an argument is old but still valid, then that's fine. The problem with creationism is that it only gets more ridiculous as you go back in time with reference to modern science, right? Because even in parts of the 90s, large sections of the creationist movement were still like, plate tectonics, that's probably not a thing. And now creationists are invoking like hyperplate tectonics that would have melted the Earth into a ball of plasma. So, is that more or less ridiculous, actually, now that I think about it? I don't really know.
the 90s creationists, but this is actually from a few months ago, 2020.
It's also not by... Oh, crap. That's bad. I hit the wrong button,
Held
guys.
across the Atlantic, themselves into extinction,
There we go.
according to British scientists.
Dangerous.
Sorry about
I
that,
am.
guys. I hit the wrong button.
I must have been a weakling back in my ancestry because I can't grow a beard. They really teach this. This just came out. This is new stuff. They say, Matt, stop making arguments from the creationists from the 90s. Well, I love the 90s creationists, but this is actually from a few months ago, 2020.
A few weeks ago? I mean, I think maybe he said months, whatever.
Here's
Doesn't matter.
another article. Dinosaurs gassed themselves into extinction.
Okay. So we're going to take a quick drink for Matt Powell using this article and not actually checking on it. So this article is from Fox News. Yeah. And it references an article that talked about Jurassic climate change being linked to methane excretion by sauropods. And of course, we're now getting a picture of an Ankylosaurus and a Tyrannosaurus in battle in late Cretaceous, North America. So Fox News found an article about the Jurassic, not involving extinction. Then they decided to write an article themselves based on it about dinosaur farts in the late Cretaceous causing an extinction. How much you want to bet that Matt Powell did not read the actual peer-reviewed paper? Because guess who did? Yeah, me. I've read this paper. It has nothing to do with extinction, and Fox News got it wrong, and Matt Powell is too big of an idiot to go anything past the Fox News article.
According to British scientists. Now, let me explain this, Doc, before you get on me, because I know there's a lot of people that accuse me.
Oh, I didn't take a drink for Matt Powell just trusting Fox News uncritically and not reading the original paper. I don't know how much this guy gets paid to do this video. I hope it's not much. Now, I've heard a rumor that Matt is now, as of like the last week or so, thinking about distancing himself from Kent Hovind, but I haven't really seen any evidence beyond just hearing that rumor, so I'm not sure. But if I were Matt, I would distance myself from Kent Hovind.
Even creationists have said, well, you're kind of misrepresenting them a little bit. You got to give them the grace. Well, you can't really misrepresent a title like that.
Yeah, but what you can misrepresent is that is the actual conclusion of the scientists in question, because it isn't. If you were to go to these scientists who publish a paper that has nothing to do with extinction or the Cretaceous and say, hey, do you think that methane excretion from sauropods causing climate change in the Jurassic resulted in the extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs? They would say no.
Dinosaurs gas themselves into extinction. But evolution does teach that dinosaurs gassed themselves to a point where they became extinct.
No, it doesn't. That's Fox News lying about a science paper. I'm gonna take a drink.
They just couldn't take it anymore. Now, evolutionists have criticized me and said, well, Matt, stop right there, Matt. What we actually believe is that they tooted and then it warmed the environment.
Yeah, and didn't cause the extinction. And here's the thing. Methane is a greenhouse gas, and current human cattle farming is adding a measurable amount of methane to the atmosphere, which, because it's a greenhouse gas, is also increasing the energy imbalance between the Earth and the Sun, making the Earth absorb more energy from the Sun than it gives off, which has to cause warming. Like, methane is a greenhouse gas. Unless Matt Powell wants to show us why it's not a ridiculous assertion. Now, the paper is not sufficient to conclude that the warming that we see during the Jurassic period in the fossil record was the result of sauropod excretions, but it's also not like a completely impossible idea.
That sounds even more stupid.
No, it doesn't.
And that's why they died.
Nope, that's not what they said. That's not why they died, because this paper doesn't talk about dinosaur extinction at all. So again, take a drink.
Died from the global warming. Okay, same thing. They tooted and it caused global warming, and then they died from the global warming.
Nope. The global warming had more or less nothing to do with the extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs.
Tooted themselves to death. This is what they believe. But they're going to tell you that the Bible's wrong.
Look, I'm not going to tell you the Bible's wrong. I don't really care if the Bible's right or wrong. What I'm going to tell you is that Matt Powell's interpretation of the Bible has to be wrong, or the Bible has to be wrong. One of those two things has to be true.
Isn't it funny? The same crowd that tells you that the Bible is superstitious is the same crowd that wants to tell you, oh, dinosaurs farted themselves to death. The same crowd.
No, it's not the same crowd. Essentially, no one but Fox News wants to tell you that dinosaurs farted themselves to death. And Fox News, not a peer-reviewed journal.
Crowd that says that it's crazy that Jesus could rise from the dead. So I was in a debate.
That's not the same crowd. I know people who accept biological evolution and who are Christians.
Oh, how could you believe that Jesus was risen from the dead? Look, they believe every living life form resurrected itself, you and I, and every other life form, from the dead.
No. Modern organisms come from other living modern organisms before they die, and don't spend any time being dead. And abiogenesis didn't involve anything being dead either, because there hadn't been anything alive to die. Non-living and dead are different, Matt. There's a difference between inanimate and dead. And I'm taking a drink.
They believe in a greater resurrection,
by which he means no resurrection,
than Christians. Here's an article.
All right, guys. Well, it's been about an hour and a half, and it's a lot harder to do this on my own. So I want to say thank you, everyone who showed up for the show. Thank you especially to Eric Virtaler and One for Null for donating their super chats. I really do appreciate it. And also, I'm going to end this after I give some channel announcements with a special thank you to my members and patrons. Remember, if you would like to become a channel member, it does start at $1.99. The link is right below this video. If you'd like to be a patron, it starts at $1 a month, or actually you can go for just under $10 for a year if you want to. We have I believe it's a 10 or 12% discount or something like that for signing up for an entire year on the Patreon. But let's see. So Thursday should be the next Leaving Young Earth, or not Leaving Young Earth Creationism, sorry, Canadian Young Earth Creationism. Saturday will be another episode about spirit science and the physics of light. Then Tuesday after that will be Eric with Erica, which was pushed away from today because Erica had to help some family. Then the Thursday after that, I will probably be doing a premiere that's going to be a mirror of my most recent debate. Then on that Saturday, Sal Cordova is going to come by and tell us why the second law of thermodynamics is not something that precludes evolution, and why creationists, which he is one of, should stop using that argument. So that's going to be the 24th. Sal Cordova is going to come here and tell us why the second law of thermodynamics argument is dumb. So there you go. Let's see. I'm probably going to be a bit hard to contact for most of this week and a little bit of next week because I have family in the area who are visiting, and I'm going to be spending a fair bit of time with them. At least that's the plan. So I may be harder to find on Twitter or Discord or whatever. So there you go. I think that is it. So here you go. Here is me getting out of here and switching over to the end credits. I just want to take a second to thank my channel members and patrons, especially those pledging $20 and above. Bob Knob, Bent Hovind, Ian Chen, Chris Love, Sphincter of Doom, The Venerable Bede, Patrick Dennis, and Res Instance. My channel members and patrons help make this channel possible, and without their support, this channel really wouldn't exist. If you would like to help support the channel as a member or patron, there are links in the description to both join the channel as well as join the Patreon. Patrons and members get mentioned in these credit scenes, as well as getting early access to my scripted videos, and if you pledge $10 or above, you can also get access to various 3D assets that I create for Blender, both for use in the channel, as well as just general giveaways to my supporters to help in any Blender projects they might have. If a monthly or annual pledge isn't for you, then there is also a merch store linked in the description, and if none of that's right for you, please just like and subscribe because every like and subscription really helps the video out. Thank you.